Good. So we've got a little bit of Singapore. We've got some North America. Well, we're going to get started because time is of the essence. Um, so happy to see you guys here. Good morning, Singapore. Good evening, US. So this is Southeast Asia Monthly Roundtable. For those of you who aren't familiar with our agenda, you'll be hearing from our speaker for 15 minutes, and then you'll have the opportunity to apply the principles that Mark's sharing with you. If we have enough, and right now we have a really small group, Mark, we may just do this all together in Miro and talk about it together. And then we'll have the opportunity as a group to talk about the results. We're really fortunate enough today to have Mark Slatin. Mark is an award-winning practitioner in the field of CX. And he's also a member of the faculty of the Masters in Customer Experience Management program. So Mark's got he's got fireworks. Isn't that nice? Wow, aren't you fancy? But Mark's, yeah, really interesting topic around leading effective CX change, which is, as we all know, is a really critical subject. So Mark, welcome. I'm going to turn the screen over to you and let you share.
Well, welcome everybody, or both of you, I should say. Very excited and honored to be able to share a little bit about what I've learned here, and so excited for those of you who are going to listen to the replay. We're going to talk about how to shift from hero to guide to drive effective CX change, as Tom mentioned, and so because it's such a small group, I may make it a little more interactive, but our focus is really going to be the interaction at the end. And so the story is about our fearless leader, our fearless CX leader. Let's just call him Lee. Lee is very initially excited about the possibilities of establishing a CX practice. He gets brought on, he sets up a VOC program. He can now measure NPS and he can report on his insights. He has communicated his CX initiatives with everybody. He's put together a governance team. But now Lee is experiencing some resistance, and Lee is kind of stuck. And this may be the way many CX leaders feel. And so Lee's struggle as a CX leader may feel an awful like this metaphor, this Greek mythological figure of Sisyphus, of pushing a rock up a hill. And it's worth a moment now to maybe discuss how difficult Lee's challenge is. CX is perceived as a passing fad now. People are going to just wait it out. Maybe he doesn't have a seat at the table. Maybe his recommendations are getting stalled and his projects don't get the support they need. He has the support until people have to make sacrifices of their time or resources, and then he doesn't have the support anymore. And it seems like as a CX leader, he's gone to his recommendations being adopted early to now he has to justify each and every action. And so as a CX leader, the feeling can be really frustrating because you know you're trying to enrich the lives of your customers. And the reality is at times you can feel ignored, unheard, invalidated, and even deflated. And so from my experience, and I've given a lot of thought to this, there are 3 keys that will absolutely help CX leaders be successful. And it starts here, which is to rethink about your role, to reframe the problem, and to reimagine your future as a starting point. So what are we going to do in terms of rethinking your role? We're going to recognize first that the CX leader wears many hats. One of them is the upset customer firefighter. You're handling hot issues with customers who are really unhappy. You're the rules police. You're trying to make sure people kind of follow through with what they're supposed to do when it comes to serving customers. You're the journey map facilitator. You got to keep the momentum going, so you're doing everything you can to keep the ball moving forward. You're the corral cowboy trying to harness all the different people together, moving forward. And you're also the ROI of CX account. You're trying to pull together the ROI all the time and justify yourself. You're doing the research with the VOC and other things, but there's also one other thing that's a really critical part of your job, and that is change agent. You're a change agent. And when we talk about reframing, so rethinking from project skills and activities and being the SME to a change agent to embed CX into the culture of an organization. Big shift in the way you think about your role. Reframing the context of your role. What do we mean by that? From being the hero to becoming a trusted guide. And that's really where our focus is going to be tonight. We'll talk more about that one in detail. And then lastly is to reimagine your future. And what do we mean by that is hoping that somehow things will change to reimagining a new vision for what your role is, what it feels like, what kind of activities you're doing. And so I might ask you to think about whether or not this is true for you. These are just some of the things I've heard over the course of time. CX leaders want to feel like they get invited to conversations instead of feeling like or being an outsider. They want to get approval for their recommendations. They want to feel valued for the efforts and the work they're doing. And they want to enjoy collaborative support from a guiding coalition of people who are pushing that rock forward with them. Does that just give me a visual? Does that make sense to you? Thumbs up. Yeah, Elaine, yep. Okay. And there's probably a whole lot more. And one of the ways to think about a successful program and how it operates is what I call the customer loyalty flywheel. So we start off by crafting or designing experiences for our customers that will ultimately increase their loyalty to us, that will lift business outcomes, and then we measure the results of what's happened and identify any gaps and cycle around the wheel again. One of the keys that has to happen to make that all work is this whole concept of change management. That goes back to the change agent and our role. And right in the middle of that is this idea of being trusted as a leader. It's a key part of a training that I do. We're going to spend most of our time talking about going from hero to guide tonight, but trust is a critical element of that whole cycle. Now, McKinsey did a study a while back, and they said that 70% of change programs fail to achieve their goals, largely due to employee resistance and a lack of management support. I've heard different numbers on what percentage of change management programs fail to achieve their goals, but it is a very, very large percentage, and that's a significant number, because a lot of what we do, as we said before, a big part of our role is change agents. So if those don't succeed, what happens? And so I'm going to say there are 4 key ideas or reasons why we have failed CX practices. Number 1, there's lack of a trust in the CX leader. Whole bunch of reasons for that, but that's one. 2 is the leader's perceived as the hero, and we'll break that down, hero versus guide, instead of a guide. There's no concrete plan, no multi-year plan that plots out priorities for CX, and leadership does not then see the value for these reasons, and also they've not been a demonstrated way to show the value of the CX efforts, or not enough of value. So how do we overcome this? It's what I call the trusted guide roadmap, and it starts off with earning trust. That is, how do I, as a CX leader, become a trusted leader? How do I become a guide? How do I act as a guide rather than a hero? Build a roadmap, as I mentioned before. How do I build a roadmap for success? And that's part of the value piece. And then how do I justify continued investment for customer experience within our organization? And that would include the first 3 as sort of the bottom part of the pyramid, and at the top is things like proving the ROI of CX, or at least stories about how we're going to make a difference and get the investment that people make, and particularly the C-suite makes in us, they'll get a return on that investment that's worthy. So we're going to talk about becoming a guide, and it has to do with this idea that every story has a hero, a guide, a victim, and a villain. So before I go into this, what would you think? There's only 3 people here. What would you think, or if you could, it'd be fun to kind of type into the chat. Just type it in. What do you think the role of the CX leader is, hero or guide? Guide or servant leader, says Amalia. Guide. Okay. And Otter's not talking right now. Tom, you're on mute, or I would have heard that laugh out loud. Okay. So So yeah, let's talk briefly about these. The victim believes they're doomed and they have no way out and they need a rescuer, right? And their feeling they have is hopeless. The villain makes others feel small in order to make them feel more powerful. And the word for them is they're narcissistic. The hero wants something in life and is willing to accept challenges in order to transform into a person capable of getting that thing. So they accept challenges. Thing about the hero is they have a particular goal, yes, but they don't, there's something in the way. There's something else they need to get over that obstacle to get to their goal. And therein comes the guide. The guide has played the hero for so long that they have the expertise or the wisdom to turn around and help someone on their path, and they share the wisdom. So, um, so let's take a look at the way stories work in a nutshell. There's a character, typically the hero, who wants something and encounters a problem before they can get it. At the peak of their despair, a guide steps into their lives and gives them a plan and calls them into action. And that action helps them avoid failure and ends in success. Right. So I'm going to share a quick story, and then we're going to move rather quickly into a working session for you to answer a couple of questions. But before, I'll share a very brief story, which is I took over the CX leadership. It didn't exist before at a bank a little over a decade ago. And there was, I thought I had everybody on all the division heads. We had a CX, we called it Client Experience Leadership Council, the CXLC. There was all the leaders from all the different areas of the bank, and we were working on developing a metric, a CX metric that was simple enough for people to understand, that resonated with the C-suite. And so one level down were all these senior vice presidents, and I believed that I had everyone on board. But turns out one of the division leaders didn't like the idea. And I thought he was on board, but I didn't really talk to him about it. And his concern was that this new metric, he had no control over it because it was basically a share of wallet metric. It measured how well customers bought across the enterprise and across the different types of products that we offered. And he then created some resistance. He had some positional power. He had some political power in the organization. It turned this project to go sideways for 3 years. And the mistake I made was I tried to be the hero instead of the guide. Meaning I was pushing this through, I was forcing this through. I really didn't have everyone on board. And this was my agenda to get this new engagement index, a client engagement index, through. But for him, I felt like a threat. So don't do what I did. And what Donald Miller, who wrote this book called Building a Story Brand, said is when a brand comes along and positions itself as the hero, customers remain distant. They hear us talking about how great our business is and start wondering if we're competing with them for scarce resources. In almost every story, the guide gives the hero a plan or a bit of information or a few steps they can use to get the job done. Right. So that is what I did not do. So in the chat, just quickly write what you think is the reason why sometimes we fall into that trap of being the hero. and then we'll wind this part down and turn it over to you. Why do we fall into that, do you think, as CX leaders? Hmm. Maybe because, got it, okay. Yeah, it'd be easier to do it ourselves. Deep down, we try to help, but not using the right means. Yeah, I think those are all very true and they're right. I think sometimes it's, for me, it was a bit of an insecurity, um, and just feeling like I had to be the subject matter expert and push things through, and it was maybe afraid that I wouldn't get their support. And so I just kind of pushed it through. Being the hero doesn't work. Here's a quick story. Some of you may have heard of this movie called The King's Speech, won an Academy Award or two. And this is a story about the King of England during Nazi Germany's invasion of Europe and other places. And in Tom Cooper's Academy Award-winning film, The King's Speech, King George VI struggles to overcome a stutter. I don't know if you remember that story, but it's a true story. As Britain prepares for the war against Germany, the Brits look to their leader for confidence and direction. And despite King George VI solicits the help of Lionel Logue, a dramatist turned speech therapist who gives him a plan, coaches him to competency, and helps him transform into a powerful orator. Brands position themselves as hero unknowingly and compete with their potential customers, and customers remain distant. That is true for CX leaders as well. So storytellers use the guide character to encourage the hero, to equip them to win the day. And so that's what happened in this movie. And obviously, you know, the UK had a big role in helping overcome Nazi Germany, and the king became a great orator. So I'm not going to ask you to type this in right now, but I would like you to think of someone in your organization who you would like to build a better relationship with. It might be very well be a key stakeholder in the organization. And just think about that person in your head as we go through the final step here. So there are 3 levels of problems that are stakeholder, in this case, the person who you've got in your head, as an example, is trying to address. It starts off with this idea of a villain. A villain is the antagonist because the villain causes the hero serious problems. But what's less obvious is in the story, there are 3 levels of problems, right, that work together to capture the reader's or the moviegoer's imagination. There's external problems, internal problems, and philosophical problems. And that's what we're going to work on in a little workout. So the 3 levels of problem, the external problems are physical, tangible problems to the hero that the hero must overcome in order to save the day. They're kind of obvious. Then there's internal, the question that makes the hero feel frustrated, incompetent, or confused. Companies tend to sell solutions to the external problems, but people buy solutions to the internal problems. But there's one more level, and that's the philosophical problem, the deeper meaning that's larger than the story itself, that can be talked about using terms like ought to or shouldn't. It ought to be this way. It shouldn't be like that, for example. Let me just give you an example. So you guys have heard of Tesla Motor Cars? Yes? Tesla? Yeah, okay. So the villain is, from Tesla's standpoint, is gas guzzling cars. We're going to be the solution to that. The external need is someone saying they need a new car. The internal need is, I want to be an early adopter of new technology. But this philosophical issue is, my choice of car ought to help save the environment. 3 different levels: external, internal, and philosophical. And one more example here, the villain. This is Edward Jones. It's a financial planning company. And the villain here is financial firms that don't listen to their customers. The external need for the customer is, I need investment help. The internal need in this example is, I'm confused about how to do this. The technology is just overwhelming. And lastly, if I'm going to invest my money, I deserve an advisor who will thoughtfully explain things in person. And that's what Edward Jones addresses, those issues. So finally, playing a guide is more than a marketing strategy. It's a position of the heart, according to Donald Miller. When a brand commits itself to other customers' journey, to helping resolve their external, internal, and philosophical problems, and then inspires them with an aspirational identity, they do more than sell products, they change lives. But we're thinking about doing the same thing to influence people who are key stakeholders to help us make the kind of change that helps that cycle that I mentioned at the beginning go around. And the reason it's probably more significant for CX leaders is because we operate with small budgets, the size of our teams is limited, and we have limited positional power or authority within the organization. Would you agree? Yeah. So the stakes are even higher for us. There's a QR code here if you want to shoot it. I have a podcast that I will have virtually every faculty member of MSU's staff on, and Tom's been on now a couple of times. But a lot of great CX thought leaders, and that's called the Delighted Customers Podcast. Great resource for you, I think. Some of the great leaders in CX have been on it. Also offered the Trusted Guide Roadmap course, which this is a part of. So with that, we're gonna flip over to the mural and answer these questions. Remember that person I asked you to think about in your head. What is?
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, given the small group, maybe it's best we just talk about it here.
Yeah.
And have them verbally share their examples.
Okay. So
since we got such a small group.
So we can just do this as a group, in a group environment. But what I want you to do is think about that person. I didn't ask you to write their initials, but you were thinking about that person you'd like to build a relationship. We don't need to know who that person is. We wouldn't know who they were anyway. But the question for you to ask is, what is for them? What is a typical external problem, an internal problem, and a philosophical problem? And then based on that, what might be a strategy that you can use as a trusted guide? So it might, I don't know, Tom, might be worth them kind of writing those things down first and then talking about them.
Well, I mean, we're pretty, I mean, this is a small group. If they can just share an example of, I mean, then we can all learn by listening. If someone can share an example as, for example, an external problem.
Hi guys. I personally don't have a particular example to think of. I think maybe not everybody has like a problem or a villain in their story. I simply don't have anybody that I could think of. Normally, if we talk about a client or a stakeholder, I think the key for me is to really try to understand their point of view, where they are coming from in the organization. I mean, like sales or if it's operations, so exactly their point of view. And I think this will determine the answer and how to deal or how to treat with that person. I'm a management consultant and have been so for many years. So in every project there is a villain, at least one, but usually three. Yeah, the key is to keep it civil, try to understand their point of view, and don't judge. I mean, don't judge. You are paid for this as a management consultant, so you simply, whether you agree with their point of view or not, have to do what they want, because yeah, you can a little bit like 30% rephrase it or put it differently, but in the end you are there to listen to your stakeholders. So this is how I approach everything. And the only place where I cannot the only time where I feel that I cannot deal with that person it's when I have this person, I mean, among us, okay, I will never say this to them in the face, but when I feel that this person has a very basic level of understanding, let's say that, okay, I have certain experience, or we as a consultants, we have certain experience and we know how to deal with this kind of issue. But there are people who are simply, I don't want to say any word, but very, very basic in their minds. So that one, it's very difficult and I didn't manage to tackle it yet. However, as a consultant, you don't have these kind of people in the C levels, which is fine. But in case you have to deal with an employee, with a frontline employee who has a very, very basic level, and somehow this person is a bit stubborn and it's a key person that you need to, yeah. This, I would appreciate if Mark has any any tips on this. Yeah, these are my 2 cents. Maybe Sarah has another point of view, or might have somebody to think of.
I'm thinking of a particular situation where a client, their external problem is, like many companies that we all partner with, they are losing customers rapidly. And so that has put kind of the spotlight on a new CXO who is brand new to the role, is not quote unquote classically trained like the rest of us. And so the internal problem there is they're just focused on metrics and they're not really interested in putting in the really hard work that we all know to be true about changing culture and helping to bring people along, building cross-functional teams. They just want it fixed, but they don't actually want to go to the operations team and go to the finance team and, go to the sales team and bring them together to talk about what is causing this huge churn of their customers. So that's a problem that I'm working through right now.
So Sarah, I would ask for if you could think about not so much your CXO, but the person maybe they're trying to most influence, or one of the people they're trying to most influence. What would you do? So the external problem sounds like we've got to stop the bleeding, and it sounds like a retention issue.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, the person that I think that we need to focus on is the sales leader, because they are the only leader who has yet to agree to meet with the CXO one-on-one. All the other, marketing and ops, they've all met with this person, but the sales person has kind of dodged all the meetings. So
let's use this illustration to walk through that sales lead, and that sales leader would be the person, right?
Yep.
Is externally, it's clear they want to improve retention.
Yep.
Customer client retention. What's the internal concern or need or problem that they have?
I think the internal problem for the salesperson is that they don't want the CXO shining a light on what might be broken in that person's department.
That's excellent. That's an excellent observation. So now let's go one level deeper philosophically. What do you think is the philosophical problem that the sales leader has?
I think it's confidence, or like maybe imposter syndrome, that they'll be quote unquote found out.
Okay, so beautifully done. And now, so you've got, and this is not uncommon, right? They're just not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you that, right? That they have a fear of being viewed as incompetent. So what might be a strategy to show up as a guide for that person, that sales leader?
Something I suggested to the CXO is to meet with that person armed with a bunch of accolades about the sales team that his team is hearing, because his team answers all, in the call center. So go to that sales leader and say, hey, we're seeing some really great movement with your recent, sales training, and here's what we're hearing. To start there, to Amalia's point, like, let's try to see it from their point of view, instead of going in there and saying, yeah, churn is a huge issue, and because you guys are so aggressive in your sales, they feel like it's bait and switch, and so they cancel. That's not going to get us anywhere. But instead, maybe starting with some reward and recognition, and then asking them, how do you think it's going? How could my team, the CX team, be better serving your team? When I was a CXO, I always found that that was helpful, to what Amalia said, to be a servant leader and to say, how can I be in service to you? Because that's disarming. And then they'll maybe open up a little bit.
Yeah, that's really smart. That's really wise. And I like that idea of coming in with a compliment, especially if there's some egos that need to be stroked. I would add also bridging, right? Making the connection between their goals, stating their goals out loud, making sure you understand. What I hear you saying is retention is critical, and are we in agreement on that? Just don't assume maybe they'll add some, well, we also need acquisition. But and absolutely get agreement on that, and then say, so what do we know about why we're losing customers, right? What do you believe to be the facts? Okay, here's what we're hearing from customers. But we want to get on the same page. We want to help you to achieve your goals, right? And we believe with this gap here, there's an opportunity for us to improve the experience, because some people are leaving because of X and Y and Z. So there's a point where you're listening, seek first to understand and then to be understood. But the whole idea there is a bridge, and the focus isn't, I need to push my agenda. The focus is, I'm going to help you achieve your goals. Here are the facts. Does that make sense?
But then we both win.
You both win, the company wins. And yeah. And that fear diminishes when he believes that you're both on the same side of the fence. Right now, you could be, without anything else said, you would be a threat. Yeah. Excellent. That's a great example. Any others? Elaine?
Elaine's being quiet.
Is it Elaine or Elaine's autopilot?
Yeah. But yeah, it seems like whether you're a consultant trying to work from whether you're a consultant working with a leadership team, or if you're leading the CX function, that often, Elaine, why don't you try logging out and logging back in? Maybe that'll help. She can't unmute herself. But yeah, it seems like, I could see where the externalities would often be at odds with the internal situation and also your philosophy, right? And maybe as a consultant, your job is really is trying to reconcile all three. And what about, what about the client that has to deal with what kind of issues does, it'll be kind of interesting to hear from you guys as consultants. What kind of issues do you see, maybe recognizing an external problem? What kind of internal issues does the person you're dealing with have to, what challenges do they have to deal with internally that you're really there to help them to guide and navigate through, so they achieve buy-in within their organization?
Yeah. Tom, can I go back to Amalia's question? So
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think I really answered that for you. So you were talking about, Amalia, the person with the basic level of knowledge, like just a foundational, maybe it's a frontline person without a great breadth of knowledge. Is that right? Yeah. So this is a funny thing, is I think this model here works regardless of the person's level of knowledge or where they sit in the organization. If we need their help, if we need their help, and there's someone who can help us move forward, and that's a lot of people in the world of CX, because everybody makes a difference in the lives of our customers. So the same concept is, understand what that person's internal problem is. Maybe there's an internal problem that they're trying to solve that will help make their job better. What's external and what's philosophical, and then work from there. I guess one of the big ways to think about this is about you know, building deeper relationships with people, right? Even people at low levels in the organization, or people without a lot of foundational, if they're part of the group of people we have identified that we need to influence and build the relationship, that starts with understanding them, understanding their, not just their stated need or their obvious need, but what's below the surface and what's the driver of those needs, and connect with them. Like this idea of Tesla, you know, this idea of I'm sick and tired of these guzzling cars, and we ought to do better for our environment. That's a deeper level of, if you can align with that person at that level, you probably are going to be able to influence them in some way. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. 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 I mean, the King of England, you know, he had a stutter. Yeah. Go ahead, Tom. What are you going to say?
It'd be interesting to hear from Sarah and Amelia. What are some of the challenges that you see that organizations have to deal with internally that seem to be at odds with the external problem they're trying to address, and the philosophy behind the work that you're trying to do?
So what I'm saying, I mean, I live in Vietnam and I work in Vietnam. So it's very different. For example, that's why I talk about maybe different kind of issue than Sarah was saying. Sarah was meaning a company that has a new CXO and maybe the sales leader, it's not on board. This is advanced problem to have. The problem that we are dealing here, that I see around, it's people are just starting to grasp the concept of customer experience. So there is no CXO. Nobody understands fully the concept. They think that customer experience may be the same with user experience or something like this. Very basic. So the steps are a little bit more not complicated or difficult for me, because again, maybe, so first we explain what it is and how it would help them. Of course, they understand how it would help them. Of course, everybody wants more sales or more client or less churn. This is easy. Then that person who is the trigger or who has some kind of interest, if he participates to a seminar or to a conference on this, has to go back to the organization and influence when he barely grasps the concept. So this is the problem that we have, the issue that we have here in Vietnam. I feel the concept of customer experience is not well understood. And this is, for example, in 2 weeks, I will organize seminar on customer experience with the Chamber of Commerce, and we try to have a common group. We try to get some people together that somebody must have some knowledge on customer experience locally, that when we can create some thinking group and some more events or seminars and extend from here. So our problem here is that they don't necessarily understand they understand how it can help them, but they say, but we already do this in the organization. Yeah, we already have surveys. We already have this one. So lack of knowledge, I guess this is called, lack of information on this topic, and lack of understanding. So, and even if they understand the concept, it's kind of difficult to get them to the next step when they need to, yeah, we do like this for many years, so why should we change, And if they are willing to change, it's just a slightly small part that will not really make an impact. Yeah, that's all. That's our point of view here in Vietnam that I see. I don't say 100%, just to like a parenthesis. There are some organizations which are coming from outside that are here for a long time, that have a CXO. But even those ones, I don't see them doing like a great customer experience work with the strategy. Yeah, I feel even they are just scratching the surface.
You're definitely not alone. I see that same thing. The client I was referring to is in a much bigger market. I live in a very small town, and so I run into the same challenges that you do, Amalia, that most of the people prospects that I'm talking to have no clue what customer experience is. So I have to go all the way back to level 100 course to explain what it is, why it's important, how you get people to buy in. And something that I found helpful is just to ask them, what is one project today that exists right now that multiple departments are working on? And I don't even really care if that's a CX, like what all of us in this call would call CX. But it's likely that that cross-functional project definitely has a CX lens to it. And so to help them see that you're actually kind of doing CX light already in your organization, you're just not calling it, which is kind of what you said. And then helping them see, okay, that one project, here are some of the pain points it's solving for your customers. You probably didn't even think about that. You probably were trying to solve it maybe for your employees, which is great. And so to try to build on this and help them see that it's very approachable. Because if we start talking about 600 level CX, design principles, we will lose people and they will not be ready to go on that long journey.
That's a great point, Sarah. Like even as I see CX today and where we are, really, we've been doing it for years, but maybe not with that level of sophistication or that framework. But that's really a great approach, and then just trying to help them to formalize it. And I apologize. It's late at night, and I've been on a liquid diet all day, so my mind's really mushy right now. I have a colonoscopy tomorrow morning, so. But no, I love, because I think one thing I do hear a lot of is CX leaders try to go in the C-suite and try to indoctrinate the leadership in the C-suite into the CX language. And largely they've failed. And it makes a lot more sense to understand the language they're using right now in the organization, but trying to get them to see it through a CX lens and maybe making incremental steps at every level to educate people on what that means in a broader sense.
Yeah, that's Tom, to your point, that is when we use CX jargon, that is a hero action.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And we've all been down, you heard a lot about, and there's a lot of discussion around NPS and whether it's helped or hindered. And I know we don't have enough time to talk about that, but
Yeah.
I know we had a conference a couple of years ago, and Bill Stykes, who's with Medallia, was there, and his approach, and he's kind of transformed in this way too, is really trying to understand the business goals and what they're trying to achieve before talking about CX, and then using CX as a means to demonstrate how CX can be used to help the organization achieve their goals, rather than coming in with a North Star for an NPS or whatever it may be, and trying to educate everyone on what that means and what their role in the organization means to NPS. But anyways, I've talked too much and my head is light, so I'm going to leave it to the ladies to talk.
Question.
Yeah, I'm please.
It's very interesting what you are saying, because obviously we are in different geography, different situations. So I'm glad, Sarah, you said that you have the same issue, because sometimes we feel that only I have this issue, or it's only. So look what I propose, because Mark and Tom, I see you have a lot of great information and presentation and something, and it seems that we are all at the point where we need to explain the basics to our, so okay, we need to know the strategies, but in order to explain, and the seminar, I need to explain the basics. So my question to you guys would be, or my request, can you, if any of you have some presentations that you gave at other seminars, or any kind of documents that you can use to make presentations, training on this topic, it would help me a lot. and I'm
Yeah.
sure it will help Sarah, it will help all of us. Maybe make like a Google Drive, or just send by email. If you could send Mark or Tom 1-2 things, it doesn't matter if you use them in like Chicago 5 years ago or for which purpose, that we can all make and create our own, maybe intro to customer experience, to
Yeah.
a better way to explain people how to what is customer experience and why do they need, before we get to the APS and share of wallet.
Yeah. I think a really good place to start and is looking at the customer journey, and asking people from different parts of the organization, to identify where their areas. And I think, you can come up with a common agreement around customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. I think that's something most people understand, right? In a very rudimentary way. The thing I like about the customer journey is you can have people from different parts of the organization and say, okay, if we all agree that customer satisfaction is important and it's a necessary ingredient for customer loyalty, and we see the benefits of customer loyalty to the organization, it, to me, it's helping them to understand how their part of the organization impacts the customer, and how they're, and what their role is in that. And it gets them thinking about how they need to work across the organization. So that may actually be a good place to start. Even if it's, okay, can we, maybe it's even explaining what loyalty is and how it's created. And I've got some materials I can send you on that. But saying, oh, can we all agree that customer loyalty is something that we all want and we all endeavor to create? And it's really, loyalty is and Mark, I'm sure you got materials on this too, because we've talked about it. And loyalty is really a function of repeated satisfactory encounters across all the contacts that they have, and they'll all nod. And then it's understanding, well, what role do each one of us play in creating that satisfaction, whether it's in a bank branch or through an app or otherwise, and creating some, maybe even getting them just to identify what their role is, and how, even if they're serving internal customers, and how ultimately their actions impact that. And then talking about, well, how can we all work together to make that happen? And maybe, I think that's where I would start with an organization if we're starting at ground zero. But and then you can start identifying some of the other skills that have to do it. Like say, well, how do we know if we're doing a good job? That's when we need to measure. Or how do we really know what customer expectations are at each one of these contact points? So you can start talking about qualitative research but anyways.
I think Amalia brings up a really good point, and something that I personally struggle with is because we're all used to operating with really complex organizations that we partner with as consultants. And then when we get a brand new client, who it sounds like what Amalia is dealing with at the large kind of city conference, I struggle going back to the 100 level. I have a hard time getting back to a beginner's mind and remembering what to get them excited about CX to the same level that I love it. It's part of who I am. It's the work I love doing, but I don't know how to like reverse back to that first day I started learning about CX to teach them.
But you know what? We're all customers too, and that's a good place to start too.
And that's usually what I ask people.
That's what I always do is, put you're all customers, right? So think about your experience. And that's kind of a grounding thing too. Is to turn it around as a customer. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. We built a orientation for every new hire in the bank I work for, that we did for every month for a year as new employees came in. And it was really designed for coming into a bank. You could have an 18-year-old high school graduate. You could have an executive coming in. Everybody had to go through it. So it had to be leveled off for the lowest common denominator, and I mean that respectfully, but for people who knew nothing about it. And so yeah, we ended up with this CX Cafe as one of the activities and it was like a restaurant, but it was explaining what CX is through that. Eventually we got to a journey map. We used the restaurant and a journey mapping activity based on a restaurant because everybody could understand what a restaurant is. Then we got into some of our specifics, and it's really nice to engage. Like we had the CEO of the bank do a little video clip as a welcome to help kind of bless and talk about the importance of it. So they talked about it, and so they knew that leadership was behind it. And so we built out really a day's worth of engaging interactive activities so they could understand what it meant. And that's, I don't know if you don't need a whole day, but as you think about it, bring to life some scenarios that are relevant to that business. For example, we had a workshop and we had a bank, we had different scenarios that created friction and we asked how they might solve it. So you had a widow who just lost her husband who then had to go back in and get the documents, and they're like, no, we need the death certificate. And it's a very vulnerable time in the life of a widow going through all this. So you think about these really important moments. And in this story that we had, it was my mother who lost my father 7 years ago. We went to 3 banks where they had their money and they didn't know it. But at the end of the day, because I live far away from her and I'm going to manage her finances, we're going to pick one bank out of the 3. And all the money's going to move out of 2 and into 1. So they didn't know that, but the way they treated us at that moment was going to make a difference. So these, about touch points and all that. I mean, but that brings it home for whoever the new employee is. Tom,
Well, and you bring up a good point. Maybe rather than focusing on their organization,
yeah,
maybe even getting them, to your point, getting them to think about a shared customer experience that they can all talk about as a customer. And what are the points of contact? What makes it special? What are the friction points? And what it really is the cost of all that, as it relates to the relationship with the customer, and what is that going to cost the organization? And really, customer experience management is nothing more than delivering consistently on customer expectations over time. And then it's just getting them to talk about, well, what do you need to do that? As an organization, what's necessary in order to do that? And I think having that dialogue across different people at different levels, and to your point, Mark, talk about a cafe like Highlands Coffee in Ho Chi Minh, or where they can all talk about experiences, what made it really, what were the different contact points, what made an exceptional experience, what didn't, how does it impact your overall impression of the business over time and your likelihood to return. And then from a business standpoint, what are the challenges? I mean, because Highlands Coffee can be hit or miss, right? I mean, I don't know how you feel, Amalia, and I've been traveling to Vietnam for 20 years now. It's not quite the same experience it used to be, maybe as it's grown, but that might be one way to think about it too.
Yeah, it's a bit different in Vietnam, maybe. Sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if you are expecting my answer now or maybe later. But it's a little bit different because Vietnamese are genuinely nice. So they will never say something to your face, or if, it's not like in Romania. If you upset the person that serves you coffee, he will give you a rude answer. They would never do this. So there is kind of intrinsic customer experience. But in terms of corporate customer experience, what you expect for a coffee in case your order is wrong, to change or to offer something or to excuse, this they don't have. So it's not so bad, but it's not so good either.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun. It's nice to have a little chat. And Mark, thanks for staying up late. And you too,
You're
Sarah.
welcome.
Sarah, where are you right now? I know you're in North America. I just don't
Yeah,
know
I'm in
where.
Indiana.
Indiana. Okay, so you're an hour behind. And Amelia and Ho Chi Minh City, it's early there. And Amelia, I get to Vietnam quite often, so we'll have to get together next time I'm
You do
there.
have to give me give me a ring, a ping, a sign, an email, anything, and we'll have a coffee to experience the Highland. I will take you to the good places, not the Highland.
Yeah,
Uh,
please, please. Yeah. All right, all right. Well, it's been a pleasure. You guys have thanks again. Appreciate it. Hopefully we see you again next month.
Good luck with your procedure. Hope it's a good patient
Thank you.
experience.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much. Have a great
Bye.
day.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you.
Bye, Elaine.
Bye.
Sorry you had problems. We'll see you.